Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my heavily armored Stamsorc build for the Wrathstone and Elsweyr patches. This is a very high damage setup that relies on mobility to avoid taking damage. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the gear. We're using 2-piece Slime Craw, 5-piece Night Mother's Gaze, and 5-piece Spriggans. I'm in 5 heavy, 2 medium because I do not have my undaunted passes on this character. If you do have your undaunted passes, run 5 heavy, 1 medium, 1 light to utilize that 6% increased max stat. I'm using tri-stat enchantments on my head, chest, and legs. Max stamina enchantments on my small pieces being the gloves, shoulders, belt, and boots. All of my gear is the impenetrable trait. And for my jewelry, I'm running 1 robust, 2 swift, 1 stamina recovery enchantment, and 2 weapon damage enchantments. For my two-hander, I'm using a Spriggan's Greatsword that is Nirnhone with a disease enchantment. And on my back bar, I'm just using a Spriggan's Bow because I accidentally deconned my Master's Bow like 2 years ago. Tried like 14 runs of VDSA and still haven't gotten a new one. Just keep getting the damn two-hander and the sword board from there. But just make sure that your back bar bow is infused with a Berserker enchantment. You'll be good to go. If you have a Master's Bow, run Night Mother's Gaze on your two-hander. And just run your Master's Bow on your back bar. So when you go to your front bar, you'll pick up Night Mother's Gaze, which will proc off a crit rush every time on your target. So you really don't need Night Mother's Gaze double barred. But with that being said, you don't really need the Master Bow. Like, I just did perfectly fine with this build without it. But if you have it, it helps out a lot. Also, if you have your Undaunted, feel free to drop Spriggans for Hulking Draugr if you have that set fully farmed. You'll wind up netting more damage and CP due to the 20% increased max stats that you receive from being over CP 501, I think it is. Or maybe it's just only in CP. I can't remember how that works. But for like no CP in Battlegrounds, use Spriggans. It's superior to Hulking. You don't get that 20% increased max stat. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over our skills. Our first skill on our two-handed bar is Forward Momentum. The skill is a nice heal over time that grants us major brutality. It makes us immune to all snares and roots for 4 seconds and also removes us from those. Our second skill is Reverse Slice. The skill is a single target execute that splashes nearby targets for 65% of the execute damage that it deals to our, whoever we decide to hit with it. Relatively cheap, but it's dodgeable. Really good ability. Third skill is Dizzying Swing. It's pretty much our spammable, and as of the Elsweyr patch, it's going to be pretty damn spammable. Right now, it's a pain in the ass to land, and it can be frustrating at times. But I got onto PTS for Elsweyr, and it feels smooth as hell. They reduced the global cooldown of the skill a little bit, and just made it much better feeling. But it's a very hard-hitting ability that knocks our opponents back 4 meters and stuns them for 3.5 seconds. If your opponent's out of stam and you catch them with a Dizzying Swing, they're dead every time. Fourth skill is Critical Rush. This ability is a guaranteed critical strike, and it's a gap closer that deals up to 40% increased damage based on how far you travel to your target. And if you're at like the 22 meter cap, it actually hits really, really hard. Our fifth skill is Bound Armaments. We don't really activate this skill, but while slotted, Bound Armaments grants us 8% more max stamina and 11% increased light attack damage. And if you do decide to cast this skill, it grants you 36% increased block mitigation for 3 seconds, which we don't have a sword and shield on this bar. So if you know you're about to get slammed by like a Sorc burst, or like in Elsweyr they're making Warden's Subterranean Assault blockable. If you know like any highly telegraphed burst that you see coming at you, you go ahead and cast this and hold block so you don't get lit up. But this ability also grants us the Daedric Summoning passives, which is, I believe, Daedric Protection. Increase our health and stamina recovery by 20% while you have a Daedric Summoning ability slotted. And that's the only one we have on this bar. Nice picking up that 20% increased stamina recovery. Our ultimate is Dawnbreaker of Smiting. It's only 107 ultimate on Stamsorc because of the Power Stone passive under the skill line that reduces our ultimate cost by 15%. And it's a very hard-hitting, cone-shaped ability that knocks down and stuns our opponents for 2.5 seconds, has a very nice amount of burst damage, and has a very strong dot to follow along with it. Wonderful ability. Just make sure you kind of want to be back from your target when you cast the ability because it's a cone. So if you have your targets pretty close to your face, they could sidestep and you can totally miss this ability and waste your ultimate. For our back bar, on our bow bar, our first skill is Critical Surge. This is the first of our 2 skills that cost Magicka, and this skill grants us Major Brutality for 33 seconds. But the most important part of this skill is it grants us a heal every time we do a critical strike with a 1 second cooldown, and that heal right now is 3,267 health. That is a nice chunk of healing just for critically striking our opponent. And with Night Mother's Gaze and Slime Crawl, we have a really high crit percentage on this build. So that's pretty much going to be healing you every 1 second. And if you're mid-kite, or if you're mid-fight and you're kiting around and don't have kids in your hurricane, try to tag them with a poison injection so you can keep this up on yourself. This skill will keep you alive. This is probably my favorite skill on Stamsorc. Our second skill is Resolving Vigor. I mean, I think everybody knows what Vigor is. It's relatively expensive AoE heal. You can heal your allies with it. Last 5 seconds, returns a very nice amount of health over those 5 seconds. And you always want to put this up before you go on the offensive so it can protect you at the start of your offensive rotation, so you don't get slammed and have to pull off the damage. Third skill is Poison Injection. This is a really nice ability. It's a ranged execute damage over time ability, and increases up to 260% more damage based on your target's health below 50% health. Really good ability. It likes to proc the poison status effect a lot too, and ever since they buffed that, it's worth mentioning. Our fourth skill is Dark Deal. This is our second Magicka cost ability. And what this ability does, it gives us stamina and health and grants us an additional 2,400 stamina over 20 seconds. It has a 1.2 second cast time, which is somewhat annoying. But it's also interruptible. So be careful where you cast. Don't cast in somebody's face. But a few patches ago, they made it to where if you're CC immune, you can't be interrupted out of it. So like if you have CC immunity up, feel free just to sit there and spam at people's faces. The heal is actually really good on this ability. It cannot critically heal for some fucking reason. But the heal is actually pretty good. We don't have a burst heal on this build. We just have Crit Surge, Vigor, Forward Momentum's hot, and if you got a nasty Defile on you, you can just kite around and spam Dark Deal. Get a nice heal. Our fifth skill is our armor buff, Hurricane. Not only is the skill an armor buff, but it also grants us Minor Expedition for the duration. And it also deals damage, increasing every 5 seconds for a total of 15 seconds. So it increases 2 times after you cast it. And it's just a really good ability. It's pretty loaded for only costing 2,000 stamina. It's the signature Stamsorc ability. But make sure you keep this up at all times. And then lastly, our ultimate is Greater Storm Atronach. This is just slotted here to grant us the Daedric Protection passive under the Daedric Summoning skill line, which gives us 20% increased health and stamina recovery. So I like to kite around on my bow bar because you get Major Expedition when you roll dodge with a bow equipped. And while you're on roll dodge cooldown and shit, you're still getting your stamina recovery. So I find that 20% increased stamina recovery pretty important. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over our champion points. Start off with the green tree, the tower. I have 61 into Warlord to reduce the cost of Break Free by 21%. 23 into Sprinter to reduce the cost of Sprint by 14%. I like to haul ass on this build. 1 into Siphoner because it's a dump and it'll still proc the 1 negative effect on your target. The middle tree, the Lover. Got 75 into Mooncraft to increase our stamina recovery by 14%. 27 into Tenacity to increase the amount of stamina our heavy attacks restore by 7%, which combines with our 25% for being in 5 heavy. And then 27 to Healthy to increase our health recovery by 7%. Probably wondering why the fuck I put these here. I wanted at least 125 points in this tree to pick up the Wind Running passive, which increases our movement speed by 2%, increases our health and magicka recovery while sprinting by 10%. For the Shadow, I have 56 in the Tumbling to reduce the cost of roll dodge by 20%. I roll dodge a lot on my bow on this build, and being in heavy, it's relatively expensive. So make sure you have at least 56 points in this tree. Or into that star, I should say. Onto the blue tree. Start off with the Apprentice. I have 43 into Blessed to increase our healing done by 10%. For the middle of the Astronaut, I have 56 in the Master at Arms to increase our damage done with direct damage attacks by 20%. And then for the final blue tree, the Ritual, I have 23 in the Thaumaturge to increase our damage over time damage by 10%. I have 56 in the Precise Strikes to increase our critical damage by 20%. 36 in the Piercing to increase our penetration by 3,117. And 56 in the Mighty to increase all of our damage done by 12%. Onto the red tree. I have 39 in the Resistant to increase our critical resistance by 1,037, and 56 in the Ironclad to reduce the damage taken by direct damage attacks by 20%. To the Lady, I have 49 points in the Hardy to reduce our physical, poison, and disease damage by 11%. 43 in the Elemental Defender to reduce our flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. And 51 in the Thick Skin to reduce our damage taken by damage over time abilities by 19%. Dots hit this build relatively hard. And then lastly, onto the Lord, I have 32 points in a Quick Recovery to increase our healing received by 8%. Alright, on this build, I am an Orc. I wouldn't really recommend any other race. This race just packs so much damage and also gives us increased sprint speed. And it's just a really strong race right now, especially for this build. I'm using the Warrior Mundus Stone. And I'm not a werewolf or a vampire. You could probably be a werewolf if you wanted to be. You'd have to tune the build to your own liking then. I'm using Artaeum Takeaway Broth. This increases our max health by 3,724, our health recovery by 351, our max stamina by 3,458, and our stamina recovery by 319. The potions that I'm using are health, crit, and stamina potions, and these are made by combining Dragonthorn, Mountain Flower, and Water Hyacinth with, how's the water called? Lorcansteers. And then the immovables that I use are made with Columbine, Dragonthorn, and where the hell is it? Wormwood. And of course, Lorcansteers. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over our rotation. First and foremost, I like to cast Crit Surge. Then Form Momentum. Dark Deal, because it's 20 seconds, where Hurricane's only 15 seconds. Like, usually if I find if you go Hurricane, then Dark Deal, like, you only get like 12 seconds of go time on your Hurricane. It usually wants to fall off when you're cleaning up like a second kid. See what I mean? Dark Deal finish casting them at 12 seconds. It's a little bit more efficient, in my opinion, to cast Dark Deal first, just so I don't have my armor buff falling off while I'm fighting. But anyway, Crit Surge, Forward Momentum, Dark Deal, Hurricane, Vigor, Light Attack, Poison Injection, Bar Swap, Crit Rush, Light Attack, D-Swing, Light Attack, Dawnbreaker, Reverse Slice. Make sure you pop your potion before that so you have your increased 10% crit chance. But outside of that, it's a pretty easy rotation. And like, say your target's still at like 60% health at the end of that. It's just like, sit there and just chain D-Swings. And Elsweyr, it's going to be relatively easy to do. And once they're in execute range, go ahead and just reverse slice their ass. If you're in a group with good players that are good at keeping their sub-Ts up on their targets, good at keeping Noxious Breath on their targets, feel free to drop Nightmother's Gaze for like Veiled Inheritance or even Hundings. So you really don't... Veiled Inheritance should proc pretty well in this build with Hurricane and Poison Injection. But I didn't really get a chance to test it, so I don't want to just say, yeah, just use that set without actually, testing it on this build. But like Huntings would even be a perfect replacement for Nightmother's Gaze. It's literally the same 2 through 4 piece, except for the 1 weapon damage bonus becomes a max stand bonus. But you pick up 300 off the 5 piece, so it would be better if you already have Major Fracture on your target being applied by one of your allies. Hope you guys enjoyed the build video. If you guys did, leave a like, subscribe. I appreciate it. Comment with any questions. I'm really quick at answering questions. I get the notification straight to my phone. So even when I'm at work, I can help you guys out. That being said, have a wonderful day.